I feel like at this point we've talked about how bad of a fall off Disney has had, and that partially has to do with the movies, it partially has to do with the message of the movies. You know, it could be that the movies themselves aren't that good, but, you know, I also feel like the fact that they're injecting so much propaganda in the movies, even if the stories were good, makes the stories seem worse. So, let's take a look at this new video by The Critical Drinker, Disney's self-inflicted boy trouble. Let's see this. A recent Variety article revealed that Disney is now looking for ways to win back young men to their brand, which is interesting for a company that both owns Star Wars and Marvel. How did it come to this? Let's find out how Disney destroyed their male audience. Yeah. I mean, listen, I used to love the Marvel movies. You know, Avengers used to be my shit. I used to binge the Iron Man trilogy, and I never watched Star Wars, but I know a lot of my friends did, and these are men that I respect, so I don't know how Disney, you know, managed to screw this one up. I actually, you know what? I do. I really do. And it's with what I just said at the beginning. It's the propaganda. It's like everywhere. It's slop.
Every once in a while, I'll stumble on a news article so brain-meltingly, soul-crushingly stupid that the only socially acceptable response is... Such was the case yesterday with this absolute corker from Variety, that always reliable bastion of respectable, impartial journalism. Disney's boy trouble. Studio seeks original IP to win back Gen Z men amid Marvel Lucasfilm struggles.
You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
Leadership at Walt Disney Studios has been pressing Hollywood creatives in recent months, multiple sources tell Variety, for movies that will bring young men back to the brand.
Alright, this is super easy because this is the same problem that the Democratic Party is spending literally tens of millions of dollars trying to solve. The young men problem. The young men problem can be solved in a very simple way, and it's don't ostracize them to begin with, okay? The best way to win young men back is to not get rid of them to begin with. You know what I'm saying? Because then you won't have to win them back. But since that's not on the table, to win them back, I would recommend doing the following things if you are Disney. 1, more cool shit, less cringe shit. Really easy. I don't feel like I need to elaborate on that, but, you know, I guess if I have to, I will. Moving on, we have less remakes in general, because that kind of displeases everybody. You know, nobody wants to feel like they're clinging on to something that's gone from the past forever. I would say that when you have remakes that are being dragged along for years and decades, that were just kind of being refed over and over again, it gets tiresome. It's like throwing up, chewing the throw up, digesting it, and then eating the shit. So, I don't know. I would say that's not good. I would also say that I would say the whole female protagonism girl boss archetype of character that they cast in these movies needs to stop. This has to be gone. I'm sick of it. You know, the whole Brie Larson shit was unbelievably just, it's what made Captain Marvel so shit, was Brie Larson was there and she sucks. And, you know, stop casting horrible people that on their social media will put men off.
In a meaningful way.
Are you serious?
Oh, really? Tell me, why would you have to do something like that? I mean, you've spent years telling us that men are irrelevant now, that nobody needs or wants those mean, stinky boys polluting culture with their toxic masculinity, that male and pale is stale, that the future is female. Why do you care about attracting men to your brand all of a sudden?
Fuck.
And therein lies the rub, dear viewer. You might utterly despise men and everything they represent, but when it comes to that increasingly uncomfortable meeting with the accountants every few months, well, it turns out that you kind of need them.
That's the funniest part about this discussion, right? Because men... You need them to make money in any business because they're half the population. You need them to get votes because they're half the population. And listen, when you push shit on men that they don't like, they're not gonna buy your product. It's that simple. Like, let's talk about this, right? Even the Minecraft movie, which is like the most simple movie about Jack Black, Lava Chicken, and I haven't even watched it, but I know it performed astronomically well. It's because I would rather watch something stupid that doesn't kind of get into like politics and make some sort of message. That's kind of it's a bad movie, right? Than something that's a really good movie, but the message is just shit, you know? That's my honest take. I'd rather watch some dumb movie with no message than a good movie with a really bad message. I honestly would.
Especially young men who seem to be quite a powerful demographic these days. Let's see what else this stunning and brave article has to say, shall we? Numerous studies show that Gen Z men in particular are a lonely, gaming-obsessed group who were hampered in their formative years by COVID-19 lockdowns. Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there before this journalistic retardation goes any further. Let's be clear about one thing. Young men were not hampered in their formative years by the lockdowns, or the patriarchy, or global warming, or social injustice, or any of the other bullshit excuses you're gonna try to throw in to obfuscate the truth. They were hampered by an entertainment media complex that spent most of the past decade systematically trying to obliterate them from modern culture. They've been berated, insulted, deconstructed, mocked, lectured, misrepresented, gaslit into believing their every natural instinct was wrong and evil, and
I think this also has to do with school. I think a lot of school nowadays has a lot of the same messaging that this media stuff has kind of baked into the curriculum. I think some of the required books and some of the extrapolations from these books they're done so in a way where you can sort of subvert the norms and you can tend to attack masculinity in a way that seems sort of benign, right? And I find that stuff is just super, not good or not healthy for the discourse, the culture, for everything. I mean, and it can be done in not just like in English class when you're reading a book. It can be done in like sex ed, where you have like an entire lesson about, consent, but the consent conversation is done so in a way to make it seem like there's not really any circumstance where you can approach a girl and not feel guilty about it, right? Honestly, because, there's a lot of conversations now about like modern consent where it's basically made so that consent, I don't know, man. It's like the whole thing where it's like you have to get an enthusiastic yes, where it's like enthusiasm is different for a lot of people. Enthusiastic, I don't know. I feel like there's just too much in the books or in school where it's making men feel weak. And I don't like that.
Simultaneously labelled as useless and irrelevant, but also somehow the cause of every negative thing that ever happens in the world, depending on which explanation is most expedient.
Yeah.
I'm so fucking tired. I thought I just needed a night's sleep, but it's more than that.
And every single time they've dared to defend themselves or push back in this completely one-sided war, they've been dismissed as sexist, misogynistic idiots and bullied or attacked into silence.
Yeah, and it's just like these stupid sloganisms too. It's like no means no. It's like, alright, listen, I think Bill Burr told a joke like this where it's like no means no. That's not even fucking true. Like, I'm not gonna just redo the joke, but he said like, no. Okay, no, that means no. But it's like, no. Like, that doesn't mean no. No, that doesn't mean no. It just doesn't.
Really that much of a surprise that after all of this,
No, stop. That's not a no.
realizing the deck is so hopelessly stacked against them that not only can they never be allowed to win, but they'll be actively punished for even trying in the first place, they finally decided, fuck it, I'm just not playing anymore. And they hit back with the most powerful weapon left in their arsenal, their wallets. If companies like Disney decide to use their platform to beat young men over the head with the message that everything male is inherently bad, then I guess young men just won't watch their stuff anymore. It's not exactly rocket science, but holy fuck, this article and others like it will explore every possible explanation except the simplest and most obvious one. And I think we know why. It actually kind of reminds me of all those articles cropping up on feminist websites these days decrying the lack of male attention after those very same sites spent years complaining about men being too forward, too assertive, too interested, too creepy, and gosh darn it, why can't they just leave us all alone? Gee, I wonder why they're not interested in dating anymore. It's a total mystery to me too, ladies. The irony is that Disney already had access to some of the biggest and most successful male-focused brands in history. And yes, both Star Wars and Marvel were decidedly male brands.
Okay, let's be honest, we're using this in Big 25.
Decidedly
This reaction gif is over 10 years old.
male brands.
Jesus.
That doesn't mean the ladies couldn't enjoy them too, and many did in fact, but if I had to choose a gender most likely to gravitate towards a franchise about space battles, adventure, ships and technology, heroism and epic struggles for the fate of the universe, yeah, it's gonna be men. And that right there is perfectly okay. Men are allowed to have stuff that they like, and a lot of the time, that stuff is going to be quite different from what women like. The problem is that only one side is ever expected to compromise and make concessions to accommodate the other, and I'll give you a little hint here. It's not women. Like, could you imagine for 1 second if they did a reboot of Sex and the City? Sorry, wait, another reboot. Only this time half the female characters were gender swapped, the glamour and sophistication of the New York social scene was replaced with muscle cars and guns and girls in bikinis, and every episode had to include some tedious subtext about how difficult modern life is for men to navigate. I don't think it would go down very well.
Dude, I don't think it's hard to, I don't know why this has become hard to talk about, but there's shit that guys like and there's shit girls like, you know? You know, they say that, like, oh, how is blue a boy's color? How is pink a girl's color? You know, all this conversation about gendered things, you know? Why does a color have a gender? Why does a game have a gender? It's like, no, they don't have genders, but obviously when things are designed for groups of people, that's done so with the intention to appeal to that group. You don't sell something to a group of people that they're not gonna like. That's pretty obvious. And at the end of the day, Disney has not been following that basic rule, and it's biting them in the ass, and they are now trying to research why it's happening. And the reason it's happening is actually so obvious that the fact that they're even spending money on it kind of blows my mind. It really does. But forget about that for a second, right? Disney, like I said, just regardless of this, has been killing their own franchises forever now. And like, I feel like in order to stop the male issue from Disney, right? Like to bring males back to their audience, they need to bring more people back to their audience in general first by making better shit. I feel like they've not been doing that. You know, I feel like that's priority number one. But yeah, I guess they're one and the same to some extent, right?
But there seems to be this weird cultural taboo around the idea of male-focused anything now.
Yeah.
Like catering specifically to men as a demographic is some moral crime that has to be addressed and corrected instead of a smart and logical business decision from a company that should be all about giving the customer what they want. In the case of those male-oriented franchise that used to be a license to print money,
I also don't understand in general. So if we talk about Sydney Sweeney being used in advertising, right? I've made this point before, but they talk about how that's bad because it's over-sexualizing women to a male audience, right? But I feel like the same type of people that make that argument are also unanimously in favor of like OnlyFans and porn and stuff, right? Like they think it's empowering. So if you're not gonna if you're not gonna have a problem with OnlyFans, then why would you have a problem with marketing that's sexualized for men at all? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense.
A smart and logical business decision from a company that should be all about giving the customer what they want. In the case of those male-oriented franchise that used to be a license to print money because they used to understand their customers, the problem wasn't just the clunky attempts to court a female audience with a sudden influx of pandering, poorly written girl bosses who could magically do anything and were always right about everything. Even women hated that shit because they were more than smart enough to see right through it. No, the bigger problem was the active sabotage, marginalization, destruction, and outright pussification of the male characters to make way for them. I've been over this kind of thing a million times before, so I'm not going to bore you with all the examples like Han, Luke, Indiana Jones, Thor, Kylo Ren, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Nick Fury, and about 100 others I could name. The list of cultural assassinations is frankly mind-boggling at this point. The point though is that instead of becoming more accessible to women, these franchises instead became increasingly hostile towards men, especially young and impressionable men who could really use some positive role models to aspire to. Instead they found themselves getting lectured, berated, and disrespected by a studio that seemed to actively hate them. And
I think people forget that a lot of kids who watch this stuff need a role model, you know? A lot of the millions of people who go to watch superhero movies want a superhero that is going to model proper behavior for them, you know? It would be good for the development of the child to have good role models and not just like a dunce male character that's sort of like a laughing stock. And I feel like that's kind of been forgotten, you know? Like when Superman was big in like the 80s and 90s, things were working kind of fine in terms of gender confusion, so.
That's the funny thing about young men, you see. They can and often do put up with a lot of shit in their daily lives, but the one thing they won't put up with is disrespect. Especially from a fucking company that wants them to part with their hard-earned money for their privilege. Add all these factors together and you get a conclusion so simple and obvious that I can't believe I'm even having to say it, but here we are. When you decide to treat half your audience as the enemy, that's exactly what you turn them into. You really do get what you fucking deserve, and in this case, Disney deserves to lose half their audience because they gave them absolutely no reason to stick around. But you know what? Rather than signing off with some smarmy little fuck you, I want to pull something positive out of this situation because it seems like even Disney are beginning to acknowledge how badly they've done wrong. Yeah, the admission's only been forced grudgingly out of them by sheer financial necessity, but it's something at least. And never let it be said that the drinker doesn't offer a helping hand to those in need. So if I could offer a few pieces of advice, speaking as someone of the male persuasion here, I'd say they have to come to terms with a few realities about their situation. The first reality is that not everything you make can appeal to everyone, and nor should you try.
That's pretty obvious. The basic rule of when you're trying to appeal to everybody, you appeal to nobody. That's sort of a golden rule that I think always applies. I think knowing that you're not going to make everybody happy ends up kind of setting you free, because you'll know that no matter what, there's always going to be people who don't like you, so you should just be yourself. You should just do what it is that you want to do. And I think in Disney's case, that should be making a good fucking movie. I think it's knowing that regardless of if you make something good or something, or not something good or something bad, but if you make something good for men or good for women, people are always going to have a problem with it, right? So if you're going to make something for a male audience, make it for a male audience. Don't make it for a Rotten Tomatoes audience of people that are going to be looking for, like approved messages and subtle, I don't know, feminist dog whistles or whatever the fuck that is that they're looking for. I don't even know what Rotten Tomatoes reviewers look for, but don't ever try to make movies for those people.
Like Barbie and Top Gun Maverick are proof that when you target a specific audience and give them exactly what they want without trying to dilute it down in the hopes of appealing to an even bigger market, you can and will make an absolute fortune. The second reality is that any project revolving around adventure, science fiction, action, or technology, like say, Star Wars and Marvel, is probably gonna skew male. I don't know what to tell you, man, but men and women tend to be interested in different things, and no amount of social conditioning or deconstruction is ever gonna change that. And if they're your two biggest franchises that you probably want to resurrect and get profitable again, then you're gonna have to accept that your primary demographic is men, and cater the content accordingly. The third reality is that you need to bring back masculine heroes if you want to get a male audience back. And I'm not talking about the safe, feminized, corporate-approved Pedro Pascal brand of masculinity that's basically just a woman with a moustache, but the actual male archetype of masculinity that's been practically outlawed in modern media. Men who are smart, capable, assertive, confident, complex, and maybe even a bit dangerous, who don't resort to verbal diarrhea or fold like a house of cards the moment a woman challenges them on something. Those are the kinds of characters that men have been drawn to for decades, and guess what? They still are. And no amount of guilt-tripping or toxic masculinity bullshit is ever going to change that. The fourth and final reality is that everyone, men and women both, are fucking sick of girl bosses. They are, without a doubt, one of the most obnoxious products of modern culture.
Dude, I think that's worse than I honestly think that worse than emasculating the males in these movies is making these women into girl boss heroes. It is insufferable. I cannot stand whenever, the video of, Megan Thee Stallion Hulk haunts me to this day. It all needs to be burned to the ground. And the fact that this is stuff that they're making and then wondering why people are leaving, it's crazy.
They've ruined practically everything they've been crowbarred into, and they have to go. That doesn't mean for 1 second that you can't have intelligent, complex, capable, and well-written female characters that push and rival their male counterparts. In fact, you absolutely should. But the days of one-sided contests where women always have to win to put men in their place, or invincible power fantasies that are either the writer's revenge fanfiction or walking inferiority complexes are well and truly over. Women don't relate to them, and men, particularly young men that have been force-fed a diet of this crap for most of their lives, are actively repulsed by anything that has them in it. Now, all of this stuff probably seems completely obvious and common sense to you, but fuck me, it feels like common sense is in short supply in Hollywood these days.
Jesus Christ.
But I think the big takeaway from all of this is that men as a demographic are not all that difficult to please. Treat them with a bit of respect, give them the things that they enjoy, and you'll be surprised how quickly they come around. On the other hand, ignore and attack them, and well, I think we've seen where that road leads.
Yeah, good video. I completely agree with everything he said. I'm actually surprised that Disney is spending money on this shit. Like, I feel like it's so easy. They just need someone to walk in and then say everything this video is saying, which he did for free, so, yeah. The old, buy a steakhouse, turn it vegan, and then get mad at the customer for not liking it. Yeah, that sounds about right. Jesus. Yeah, good video.